All right, everybody, we are live again. Dynasty Mir, search for Uhuru. I have the brother Ọnuọra on with us again today, brother Abụah. And tonight's topic, little controversial, I know a lot of people get a little sensitive when it comes to this topic because of Biafra, and we're gonna build on that as well. Are the Igbos really being marginalized in Nigeria? Now, Ọnuọra, I know offline you somewhat hinted to the Igbos. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't want to twist your words. Did you say aren't given the opportunity to really participate in politics like the Yoruba and the Hausa? Is that true?
To a degree, but then first of all, thank you as usual for having me on your show. I really appreciate the invite.
Anytime.
But I think we're talking about, yes, the Igbos to an extent, but it's more so the other groups that exist within the southeastern or south part of Nigeria. You have you have different groups who have been deliberately excluded from the top seat in government for over 40 years, maybe even 50 years. And there's a deliberate reason for that. Now, the Igbos in particular, it's important to mention the Igbos in particular because the Igbos, if you look at the start of the pre-independence time, post-independence time, at least for the first, nearly the first decade, Igbos were a prominent part of the Nigerian body politic, and particularly the top role. You had two Igbo presidents between 1960 and 1967.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so the first president of Nigeria, Nnamdi Azikiwe, who's a HBCU man, by the way. I think he went to Howard.
Interesting fact. Just about all the African presidents went to a HBCU.
Yeah. So you had Nnamdi Azikiwe, and even when there was a coup, which was led by an Igbo man to get rid of the corrupt leaders that were there at the time, it was led by an Igbo man, and an Igbo man took over after him. So Agui Ironsi was a military president. So when you look at that, you look at the prominence of Igbo people in trade and in business all across Nigeria at that point in time. You wonder how after the 1970, once 1970 had happened and the war was over, why it was so difficult for Igbos to ever really contest for the top position anymore. But again, this is more than just the Igbos. This is all the different groups, the Urobo, Ishakiri, have been completely marginalized from the political society.
Can I interject real quick now? An Igbo woman told me the reason why Igbos don't focus on politics as much is because they're more focused on solely business. Is there any? How do you feel about that comment?
I think politics is a very important part of business. If you're involved in politics, you're able to put together legislation that allows you to do business even better. So, in fact, I don't know why she would say that. That maybe at a very menial level, but at the if you want to succeed in business, you want to be in cahoots with politicians, and it's much easier for you to put people who are in people who are closer to you in terms of culture in positions of power. But I don't know. I don't really know why she would have said that, other than maybe she's talking at a smaller level.
I don't know.
That's what she told me. Yeah, I think for the top seat, people generally, everybody vies for positions. And by the way, it's not as if Igbo people don't run for president every year, but you never see them in the two top parties. It always has vice president. And it's interesting because Alex Ekwueme was the next after 1966 or 1967 when Agui Ironsi, the last Igbo president, was killed. Yakubu Gowon, who was a Christian Hausa man from the north, from Plateau, I think Plateau State, or just those states close to Abuja now. He took over power, and then when he was removed from power, there was a minor dictatorship by Obasanjo, and then later there was a democratic president, and his vice president was a man called Alex Ekwueme, who was Igbo. Now, he was the last man to ever really hold any kind of prominent position in Nigerian, in terms of the presidency, vice president. So he's the last person to do it. And then Goodluck Jonathan very recently, even though I think his mother is Igbo, but his father is from one of the even smaller groups of the Niger Delta region. So one of the smaller minority groups. But he came in really because he was the vice president and the president died. So you have not seen, and I think obviously we talked about Atiku Abubakar's vice president, who is an Igbo man, Peter Obi, former governor of my state, Anambra State. So they always put them strategically in these vice president roles, but you never see them really pushing a candidate that's a president, you know. And I think that Yorubas can make a small argument about that too. But they had 8 years of Obasanjo and nearly a third term of Obasanjo, and Obasanjo is still very much a prominent part in deciding who gets elected. But you never see Igbo candidates being put forward.
Let me ask you this. So when people are bringing it up in the chat room, they say Igbos are very tribalistic. That's why that they kind of what's the word I want to say? Not I guess isolate themselves from everybody else. Which, from my experience, I could low key somewhat co-sign on. What are your thoughts on that statement?
Well, I think they only have to travel across Nigeria to find out that Igbos probably integrate more than anybody.
Okay.
It's very seldom that you'll find a Yoruba man or a Yoruba family that's grown up in the Igbo land or in the southeast or the south, even in the north to an extent. But you go all across Nigeria, Igbo people, I don't think there's anybody in the chat room who's actually from Nigeria that can argue with me. Igbo people are the ones who travel the most. They travel the most and they live in different parts of the country more than anybody. That one you can't argue. So I think even to say that they're tribalistic, I think that's to assume that Igbos are cocooned in their place and don't leave, which is not true. In fact, it's more likely you can say people in the southwest and even in the north don't really travel. You know, they don't really migrate to other places to try and intermingle with different Nigerians, different ethnic groups in Nigeria. But the Igbos are the ones that, without a shadow of a doubt, you could say, are the only ones that do it and have been doing it for 100 years.
Now, let's get to the Biafra War. Now,
okay.
Can you go into detail on how that started? Because when I talked to a lot of people, they said this war could have been avoided, that the Igbos just decided to go to war for no reason. What would be your response to that?
Okay. Well, let me answer that last part first. The Igbos went to war for no reason. Well, I don't know if you've ever heard of Emeka Ojukwu. Emeka Ojukwu was the person who eventually became president of Biafra, who led the secession from Nigeria.
Now, is he the guy that's? I don't want to get people mixed up, and I might. Is he the guy that starved like 2 million people? Allegedly.
And again, allegedly. Okay, let's deal with facts. He was the guy who was the head of state of Biafran people. The starvation came more as a result of the blockading by the Federal Republic of Nigeria. It's not as if these people wanted to starve themselves as a political tool, but they used the propaganda of starving kids to get the world to look at what they were going through and decided that and get people to side them, like France and even Ivory Coast and different countries like that. But anyway, Emeka Ojukwu was the quartermaster general of the Nigerian army just before the war broke out. Quartermaster general is the person who's responsible for giving arms and giving weapons, distributing all of these things. Now, if you read his autobiography, which I've read, and my views about him are not, like some people look at him like some type of savior or deity. I look at him like a man who was flawed. But there are certain things that I know if he was in a position to do, he was smart enough to do it. I mean, this is an Oxford trained man. He went to Eton, all these, he's definitely schooled on the European way of, confusing people and manipulating. So as quartermaster general, if he knew he was going to go to war with the Federal Republic of Nigeria, he would have just sent all the arms to the east and started arming the troops. And then the Nigerian army wouldn't have had to, the Igbo army, the so-called Biafran army would have had to resort to making rockets and handmade weapons, handmade weapons using very locally produced materials. They wouldn't have starved even because he would have shipped everything to the east. But anyway, I digress. Let me go back to the origin of the war. So like I said before in this program, Nigeria was amalgamated. You had the northern Nigeria was merged with the western and the south and the eastern region of Nigeria. 3 geopolitical regions. These were how they pretty much stayed through the through till the point where they went to war with the Biafra War. So this is, we're talking of 1914 onwards, right? Now immediately that happened, you had people from the east, some people from the southwest that were traveling around, but mostly Igbo people were going around Nigeria and doing business, living in the north in particular, because the north has a vast land, and people there, you know, this is just a case. Matter of fact, it's not even, I'm not making this up. The north was more uneducated. What they call the Almajiri.
I heard that, and from my understanding, and you could dive into this after you finish answering this question. Now, from my understanding, the reason why the north of the Hausa, if I'm saying that, Fulani, the reason why they're in power is because during colonialism, the British made it that way.
Yeah, they had their colonial rule they call indirect rule. So you had a governor general, and it's not just for them, it's for places, those sub-Saharan regions, they had the same sort of system because they had Islam. And so once the emirs succumbed to the British or the French, whatever they were, they literally allowed them to stay in power. But then there was a governor general that they'll have to write. In fact, there's a very good documentary, one of the few documentaries that was made well about this type of stuff by Basil Davidson. It's called Africa. It's made in the 1980s. I think you'll find it on YouTube, actually. You should watch it. I think episode 6 or 7, they start talking about that colonialism. But anyway, yeah, so those northerners, it was an indirect rule. So it was deliberately made like that, where you didn't have a governor general, an army, you know, on every kind of a soldier on every street corner sort of thing. It was more indirect. There was probably one white man that was living in a proximity of, say, 50 miles, you know? So he just represented the British government. But anyway, like I was saying, so the people in that part of the world were less educated in terms of, certainly when you compare it to the South. And this is not a slight to them, because if you go to places like Congo, you know, they didn't even give them any kind of education. It was very, you know, you had something like 30 people with university degrees at the time that Congo became independent. But the North still had a few people. But the people who were very well educated were the, you know, relatives of the emir, relatives of the royal. So Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, by the way, for example, was one of them, who later became prime minister. But anyway, let me make my point. So the Igbos were traveling and doing different types of trade. And as independence was approaching, you had these 3 regions, and the North wanted to secede because they were very different. They felt they were very different in terms of Islam and so on. And the South really wanted to convert. The South had all the railways, had all the big business, people transporting things, people were moving back and forth. It was very much a vibrant culture in the South, you know, obviously because that's more where the Europeans were, but that's also where we had access to education and so on and so forth. So the North wanted to secede. But in the end, the 3 groups came together, and in 1960, they became independent. And in 1963, they wrote their own constitution. So the 3 premiers of the 3 regions, so Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, Obafemi Awolowo was the representative of the Western region. Obafemi, by the way, is, the other day I made a mistake with the University of Ife. So Obafemi Awolowo University is,
yes,
actually named. Yeah, but the reason why I got that mistake was he's actually from Ogun State. So, and the university is called Obafemi Awolowo University. So he was the premier of the Western region. Then you had the Eastern region, which the premier was Nnamdi Azikiwe, who later became president. And then you had the North, which was run by Abubakar Tafawa Balewa. So the 3 groups come together. The country is independent. Nnamdi Azikiwe becomes president. Abubakar Tafawa Balewa becomes prime minister. So the people are still trading, everything's still going on, but then people in the North are beginning to see Igbos really dominating, right? And of course, through propaganda and so many other things, you start having these minor skirmishes where in markets, they will beat up a few Igbo people, they might kill 1 or 2 of them, you know, and then this thing starts becoming a crisis, right? A mini crisis, at least that's what was reported. As time goes by, there's corruption seeps into this new government, as usual. And some military soldiers, junior military officers, one called Chukuma Nzogu, who was nicknamed Kaduna, because he's one of the many Igbos who grew up in Kaduna. Him and a group of other officers, mostly Igbo, but also Yoruba and a few Hausa ones, did this, had this coup in 1966, where they literally were trying to take out every single premier, Senate president, presidents, prime ministers. They were trying to take everybody out. They successfully took out Tafawa Balewa, but they didn't take out Nnamdi Azikiwe, because I think he was away on an international trip or something like that. And in fact, his vice president, not his vice president, Senate president at the time, who was Igbo, was the acting president at the time. Anyway, the coup failed, right? And this was part of the propaganda of the North. They say, you see, you've killed our premier, he's a Hausa man, and it's all these Igbo people that came and killed him, all these Igbo soldiers. So the mentality was like, it just seeped into this is why we need to secede. This is why we need to separate from mainstream Nigeria, because, you know, these Igbo people are going to try and kill us. They're going to take all our business. You know, the usual xenophobic propaganda that's put out before pogroms start all around the world.
Can I ask a question, Ọnuọra? It was on my mind. And I asked the same question during when they had the civil war in Sierra Leone and Liberia. When I went to Lagos, I noticed in Abidjan and Ivory Coast and in Lagos, the Lebanese are, I mean, like all the nice high-end restaurants and just a lot of businesses ran by the Lebanese. Okay, during these coups and civil wars in Nigeria, Biafra, what were the Lebanese doing? Were they even touched?
I mean, well, no, of course. The simple answer is no. They never are touched. Just like the U.S. embassy somehow manages to survive every kind of atrocity, except in Libya recently. So anyway, this is, you know, we know the answer to that question.
Right, okay.
They always stick with the right people. They're untouchable. It's still part of this white Jesus mentality. We still we had it back then. We have it now. Anyway, so the coup happens and it fails, and the head of the military, the army chief of staff, who is Agui Ironsi, another Igbo man, takes over power. Now, what he decides to do, because at that point you had the three geopolitical regions, and they were always ruled by somebody who was not from that place. He makes the fundamental mistake of sending Igbos he sent Emeka Ojukwu, who was a lieutenant or major or something at the time, to be the premier of the eastern region, sent a Yoruba to the western region, sent a Hausa man to the northern region. So that already fed into the crisis that was going on. Anyway, long story short, Emeka Ojukwu has to start contending with a lot of Igbo refugees, if you will, migrating back to the east in large numbers. These are people who have businesses in the north, businesses in the west, in Lagos, including Emeka Ojukwu's father. It's another thing that we don't talk about. Emeka Ojukwu's father was one of the wealthiest men in Nigeria. He started doing what Dangote's family was doing.
Right.
So he was doing trucking, shipping goods, locally produced goods between Lagos, the north, and everything. In fact, that's why Emeka Ojukwu spoke he spoke the three main languages: Igbo, Hausa, and Yoruba, because he grew up in Lagos, grew up in the north, and also was an Igbo man. So this trade thing was a major deal for Igbo people. And of course, when you see them in power, when you recognize that they're more of a minority in comparison to the Hausas and the Fulanis, then the resentment came. So anyway, the Igbo man goes to the east, and Emeka Ojukwu has to contend with the refugees that are coming in from different parts of the place. And skirmishes continue to happen, right? They continue to happen. And so Emeka Ojukwu feels, and rightfully or wrongfully, he feels that Biafra, let us make an independent state called Biafra. Let us secede from Nigeria. And he used basically the crisis that was going on in the north to kind of galvanize his people to believe that this is a worthy cause. And then this is partly where all these Jewish, Hebrew Israelites, all these kind of stories.
Let me close this door real quick, but that's going to be my next question.
Okay. So the Hebrew Israelite stuff starts coming into it a little bit, starts impacting the way people.
We are the white Jews. Like, where did that come from?
Where the Jews of Africa. That's growing up. That's what we always had. Where the Igbos are the Jews of Africa, and I believed it somehow, but I didn't even understand what that meant. Anyway, these people. Biafra secedes, and eventually, and because of the poor planning of the Nigerian army,
right,
Biafra really goes very far. They get just outside, I think, Ogun State or your state, one of those states. They get very close to Lagos, which is the capital at the time.
Your state.
So
yeah. Oh wow. Yeah, that's close to
Lagos. They get that close to the extent where the then president of the Nigerian government, Yakubu Gowon, was nearly about to. The story goes anyway. I don't know how true it is, but he had fired up his jet. He was ready. He said that if they break through the border of Lagos, then he's gone. Right. Sure. So anyway, because of the story goes somewhere outside Edo, I think it was one of the leaders that they had in the army, and I forget his name. It probably was Awolowo. It may not have been Awolowo, but they had somebody who was taken as a politician with the army. I think it was Awolowo. He ends up stopping there and talking to an old friend of his who was some type of political ruler in Edo State, I believe it was. I'm not sure. This is from Emeka Ojukwu's biography, which you can pick up. Anyway, and that's what slowed down the army. So the Nigerian army got themselves ready, and they eventually pushed them back all the way back to Onitsha, and then they blew up the bridge, the Niger Bridge, which is which basically separates Igbo land from the rest of Nigeria, that River Niger. So there's one bridge. They have never built another bridge, it's the same bridge. Anyway, the Igbos blew it up. Now, as time went by, the Nigerian army got itself together, started really reinforcing, and then they were just taking chunks of what was then Biafra. They broke Anambra State, Enugu. The Biafrans kept moving the capital. And this is where the starvation came. You had a lot of there's a charity in Britain, which basically was formed because of the Biafran War.
Oh, wow.
You know, they did adverts on the BBC saying, oh, there's a little country in Biafra that's fighting its cause. You know, this is the propaganda of Emeka Ojukwu. He worked on that propaganda. This is an Oxford educated man, Eton trained man, and so on. So he knows how to play with white people. He even got the people in the French parliament to start talking about Biafra as though it's this state run by Catholics or Christians who are being harassed by the larger nation because they have oil and all of these things. And this is why really Nigeria was not going to give up Biafra, because Biafra had the regions that had all the oil wells. Well, not all of them, but most of them. Bayelsa and all that.
Is Niger Delta in Igbo land?
The Niger Delta region actually goes even as far as Ondo, which is a Yoruba place, technically speaking. The Niger Delta region, at least the state called Delta, is the states just before what you call Igbo land. In fact, my family is part Anambra, they're in Anambra and Delta. So you had, but this is. In fact, we can talk about that one a little bit later because there's many complexities to it too. Anyway, so the Biafra starts getting smaller and smaller, and you have volunteer, mercenaries that are flying into Biafra to help them out. You have pilots that are coming in and dropping food to help the kids and so on. And Emeka Ojukwu, I think, even got on the front cover of Time magazine at the time while this is going on. So, there's an argument that maybe he did this he was conceited, whatever. Anyway, many presidents, including the president of Ghana and later, I think, president of Ivory Coast, try and do these not peacekeeping. They try to have these summits between the president of Nigeria and Emeka Ojukwu to try and, squash this war. Right. And they had numerous ones. They even had one at Aburi. I don't know how you say it in Ghana. They had one in Ivory Coast and so on. And eventually, Biafra has been whittled down to a tiny, tiny piece of land to the extent where, and there's a documentary that was made about 20 years ago. It's called the Nigerian Biafra War, something like that. You should watch it. It's on YouTube as well, I think. Okay. You see how, these Igbo people, and it's not just Igbo people, this is the important part, they were Calabar people, all the different groups of that region, the Igbos and so on. They were all part of this war, but they all bought into Ojukwu's philosophy that they are on their own. And so you know, these people are going to war, they're dying and so on, including Major Nzogu, who was the guy who committed the coup, if you remember. Now, he was actually sent to Biafra because he was an Igbo man while he was, you know, in prison. But instead, Ojukwu gave him a gun and said, go to the front. And he led a battle. He led a small battalion of troops, eventually died in battle. Anyway, eventually, Emeka Ojukwu flies to Ivory Coast for a peace treaty. And the story goes that Major Effiong, who was a Calabar man, and his number 2, surrendered while he was away. Now, that's what really happened. But we don't know whether Emeka Ojukwu fled because he didn't want to be captured, or whether he fled for an actual peace summit, which was supposedly what he went out there for. Anyway, Major Philip Effiong agrees, and then they start bringing Biafra back into Nigeria, and people slowly start to migrate back into the West, into Lagos, and so on, to continue their business, including my mother-in-law is actually one of them. She was in Lagos with a Yoruba family during the war. She came back to Enugu to be a nurse, to volunteer nurse. She eventually went back to continue her studies. But what they did was they allowed a lot of the army back into their posts, but at a very monitored level. But also they did this thing called, I think it was the 1 pound rule. So they basically, these people, it doesn't matter how much money you were worth, how much money you had in Lagos, all the houses you had in Lagos, or different parts of the Nigeria, they gave you £1. So a lot of people didn't really get back their property. So Igbos really had to start from scratch. And these are people who for, at that point, nearly 50, 60 years, had been traveling all around the country doing business and living in different parts of the country. So that was something, this is where the marginalization started becoming more prominent. So Biafrans Biafra was no more. And Emeka Ojukwu stayed in exile in Ivory Coast until I think 1983, something like that. So from 1970 to 1983, he was in exile. Anyway, I'll just summarize here, I guess. But anyway, from that point on, Yakubu Gowon, who was the president from the north, stayed in power. Eventually, Murtala Mohammed took over after him. He was a Muslim who the airport's named after him. Then Obasanjo briefly when Murtala Mohammed was killed. And then they had a period of democracy, which lasted 2 or 3 years and was one of the most corrupt governments, what they call the Second Republic, I believe. One of the most corrupt governments in Nigeria's history. Of course, they've been terrible ones since, but at that point, definitely one of the worst. And then a dictatorship happens again, run by Babangida, who's a Muslim from Niger State, excuse me. Then after him, they had democracy. MQ Abiola, a Yoruba man, became president democratically. He wasn't, the election was annulled. And very shortly afterwards, Abacha, another northerner, took over power. I think he's also from Niger State. Took over power, was a dictator for about 5-6 years. He was killed. Abdul Salam Abubakar, another northerner, took over for a year as they transitioned to democracy. Then Obasanjo, out of prison, a former president, came and was given the candidacy from the PDP. He was broke, but because they recognized this is the guy to heal the wounds that they might have, they put him in power. He stayed for 8 years. Immediately after him, he tried to vie for a third term. It didn't work out. Immediately after him was a man called Umaru Yaradua, another northerner, right? Another northerner. He comes, he dies in power. He dies in power because he was sick. And then his vice president, who is Goodluck Jonathan, who is really from the South, what they call the South, technically what the Biafran region would have been. He takes over. In fact, they didn't want him to take over. They kept denying him the opportunity to take over. They were lying that Yaradua wasn't dead and so on, even though he was in Saudi Arabia, dead, brain dead. Eventually, Goodluck takes over, finishes the guy's term, runs for one more time and stays there. When he's about to run for the second term, his second official term, Buhari takes over, another northerner. And so you can see the pattern that has emerged as time has gone by. where Igbos really have never been allowed an opportunity to vie for the top role. But more importantly, all other groups, whether you're a Shekiri, you speak Urobo, you're from any Ogoni, it doesn't matter who you are. The minority groups have never been given power, but the Igbos in particular have definitely been shut down since the 1960s.
Somebody in the chat room, a couple statements in the chat room. Igbo land is not part of the South states where most of the oil comes from. There's somebody sitting here saying Igbos are greedy. And then somebody else says that if the Igbos wanted to succeed, hold on. Something about they wanted the land in the East. Why did they try to conquer the West?
Well, I don't understand. So just repeat that last question for me.
I guess you guys wanted the eastern part of Nigeria.
So Biafra seceded. So they decided, you know what, forget Nigeria. We're gonna make our own country in this land.
Yeah. So then the question, if you guys wanted to succeed, why did you guys march towards Lagos? I guess
because the Nigerian army, the Federal Republic declared war on Biafra.
Oh, okay.
So they launched a preemptive strike in order to try and if somebody declares war on you, you catch them when they're sleeping. So they went to try and you defeat the army that is trying to take you by taking their capital. So they had to march to Lagos and defeat it and take Lagos in order to stay as Biafra. Yeah.
Okay. And then somebody saying the Igbo could have had a country within Nigeria if Ojukwu had signed the Abụah agreement in Ghana. Is that true?
The Abụah declaration. I mean, look, I don't really, there are too many different accounts of why he didn't sign, why he did sign, or whatever. There are too many accounts, so I don't really know. But the point is this: at the time that he had to sign the Abụah declaration, what was then called Biafra was whittled down to a much smaller piece of land than when it started in 1967. So either way, it wasn't the land that he wanted or that the Biafrans wanted. It would have been one that was partitioned. Maybe Anambra State would have been part of Federal Republic of Nigeria, and people who were from there would have had to move into Biafra and so on. So it's not, and with all due respect, some people are, this kind of
touchy subject.
Get very frustrated.
Yeah, very touchy subject. Yeah.
So I'm trying to just stick to the facts here as much as possible.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see here. And if somebody said good luck, I think he brought this up already. Good luck, Jonathan was an Ija, a minority.
Yeah. In fact, Ijo people are one of the minorities of Nigeria. And by the way, Ijo people, and this is the thing. This is why I think earlier you were bringing up a point about the Niger Delta region, and I said I'll come back to it.
Right.
You see, there are many different groups in Nigeria so take Ijo people, for example. Omoyele Sowore, who we've talked about numerous times, is an Ijo. He's from Ondo State. He's a Yoruba-speaking Ijo. Goodluck Jonathan's father is from Bayelsa, what is now called Bayelsa. By the way, Bayelsa is one of the newer states. So during the time of, in fact, the state system came after the Biafra War. Then it was just regions, 3 regions, that was it. Goodluck Jonathan's father is from Bayelsa, which is in what they call the South-South. He's more of I don't think he speaks Igbo. I think he does. I'm not sure, but he's whatever language they speak is closer to the Igbo dialect. So you have Ijo people, which is one ethnic group that spans from Yoruba land to Igbo land. So it's a very dangerous thing to even talk about the ethnic groups per se, because they don't just necessarily reside in one part of the country. Different groups are in different places. When you talk about King Jaja of Opobo, for example, who was one of the great kings that was eventually exiled to, is it Virgin Islands, one of these places? He was from a kingdom that was in modern day, I think Delta State or River State. But the people around that place, Delta State, for example, like I said, has Ishakiris, and it also has Igbo people. So it's not, if we focus too much on this state system and the tribes or ethnic groups that reside in them, we'll be here all day. So even to say, I think one of the comments that was made is the South-South is not, I don't remember what the comment was, something about the South-South.
The South-South is not part of Igbo land, I think.
The South itself, these 6 geopolitical regions of Nigeria, is also a fairly new invention. You see, let me give you some. So like I said, you had the 3 regions. You had, first of all, 2 regions in the South, then they merged it with the northern region, a vast piece of land. So you had 3 regions. After the Biafra War, it changed and they started bringing a state system. They initially had 18 states, then they had 30, now we have 36. So in fact, the last 6 came, I think, in the last 20 years. So you had a period before that where you had only 30, then you had something like 26, then 18, and then before that, just 3 regions. So when the country is divided in just 3 regions, people are scattered all over the place. So what is called the South-South, which is a geopolitical term, it's, if you look at it, when you look at it, say South-South, South-South, that would assume that you would assume there's a peninsula in Nigeria. There isn't. Right. It's like when you look at Italy in Europe, right? Italy in Europe sticks out. It looks like a peninsula. So that you could say that's South-South. But then when they call South-South in Nigeria, it does. If you look at the map of Nigeria, it doesn't really make sense to call it South-South. Okay. It's more the South-East. So, these are where, again, with all due respect to some people are just going by terms that they heard and they see, and they don't really think deeply about it. So, let me not insult anybody.
Yeah. Guys, let's get the likes up. We have 111 people watching, only 27 likes. Let's get these likes up. So people are saying, which Igbo state has oil?
So technically speaking, the majority of the oil is in what is called the Niger Delta.
I always for some reason thought Niger Delta was Igbo territory.
You have some Igbo speaking people there. You have Ijo people there. Ijos are also part of Igbo, so it's again. So you have places like River State, places like Bayelsa, places like Delta State. Those are the 3 prominent places. Delta State is obviously known for the governor that they had recently, Ibori, who one of the worst. He just served a prison sentence in Britain. So he's one of the ones who looted it. Bayelsa had another governor called Alamesia who escaped England dressed like a woman. I don't know if you're aware.
Okay. Somebody said that the guy that was leader of the Biafra, that he escaped by wearing red heels as a transvestite or something.
From what I understand, and sadly, look, we're going back 51 years. The story goes he went to Ivory Coast for another peace meeting. So I don't think he would have had to dress up like a girl or anything like that. He would have had a plane waiting for him to go to this peace summit. And while he was away, his deputy surrendered. So the guy who I know did that was Alamesia, who was a governor of Bayelsa State. And I think in 2004, 2005, when the EFCC was set up, which was a task force by the by Obasanjo's regime to tackle corruption, even though he didn't tackle himself, by the way. They went to try and get a lot of people. They tried to get Ibori, and they also tried to get Alamesia. Alamesia was the governor. In fact, I went to school with his son. We went to university together. Okay. So he was actually, he escaped to UK because the UK Scotland Yard got involved, and they were also trying to catch these guys. In fact, Ibori, Delta State one, was actually caught in Dubai with a joint force of Scotland Yard and Nigerian EFCC. Anyway, Alamesia dressed up like a woman, and I think went through Dover, which is on the coast of England, and somehow got to Nigeria. But there are other stories like that. There was Umaru Diko, who was a petroleum minister, I think it was in the 1980s, who also drove to Cotonou and dressed up like a woman and went to England. So there's so many stories like this. I don't know which one is true. I don't
know. Now, let me add, this is a very controversial question. Now, people keep saying that Nigeria cannot continue as Nigeria, that it needs to be separated. Like, it'll be like pretty much the situation we have in Nigeria right now will be equivalent to Germany, France, and Italy being one country. What are your thoughts on that?
First of all, very, very, I think that last statement, let me just deal with that first, that it would be like Germany, France, and England. I think you only have to look at the size of Nigeria. Nigeria is, I think, the size of Texas, just about.
No, it has to be bigger than Texas. Nigeria has to be bigger.
No. In terms of square miles, it's about the size of Texas.
Really?
It's no bigger than that. Google it. Google it yourself.
So you have almost 200 million people in
exactly in a small. Yeah, exactly. But also, just Nigeria is not this big complex country as people make it out to be. You can fly from one corner, the furthermost corner of Nigeria, to the other in about 2 to 3 hours maximum, right? In America, I know you can go from one coast to the other. It takes 5-6 hours.
Well, if that's the case, then Nigeria is bigger than Texas.
No, Nigeria is the same size as Texas. It might be a few 100 or 1,000 square kilometers difference, but you just look it up. But anyway, just to directly answer this person's point.
And Nigeria is bigger than Texas. Nigeria is definitely bigger than Texas. I just looked it up. It's bigger.
But not that much bigger. They're about the same size.
About 100,000 square miles.
Look at the square miles and compare them. It's not that much difference. And compare that to USA and Europe, even Western Europe. Nigeria and Texas, if you study the actual square miles that they cover, it's about the same. It's not going to be exactly the same, of course, but it's about the same. Anyway, what was I saying? So, what was I saying? Yes, so to directly answer the person's point, first start, a place like America, which operates the same sort of system that we have, to go from one corner to the other it takes you a long time. But they have managed to build infrastructure in order to make it simple. Now, you see the people that are clamoring for this, and the term that they use is restructuring. That's the buzzword at the moment going along with the politicians. These 70-plus-year-old politicians are talking about restructuring. In other words, devolution of power, making the regions more independent and so on, which is a good thing in theory. But the idea is this: if these people are the ones that decide on how Nigeria is distributed, if you will, if they're the ones that decide who's going to be ruling those places. So, for example, the most corrupt of corrupt politicians, let's say they decide to separate the northern region, you're still going to be left with your Babangida, your Buharis, you're still going to be left with those people who are ruling it. In the east, you're going to be left with your Rochas, Okorochas, and so on. In the west, you have your Tinubus and so on, right? So the point is, no matter how you decide to restructure the country, it has to be restructured with the people's decision. You see, if there's no justice in a land, it doesn't matter how you restructure it. You see, if Nigeria had justice, where everybody was treated fairly, nobody will be clamoring for Biafra. You probably wouldn't have Boko Haram and all these things that they come out of economic reasons. People are suffering, and so they therefore cling to all sorts of things that they don't need to, right? If you look in places like Europe where they have systems that work, we won't necessarily criticize the system, but they have systems that work. You don't see people getting up clamoring for this and that because they feel like they can be heard. In places like Nigeria, they feel they cannot be heard. So therefore, people turn to all sorts of other things. And even this restructuring thing, you got to be very careful who restructures your country. If a 70-year-old man restructures my country, he's going to be dead in 10, at most 15 years. You have to let the youth don't even get an opportunity to get involved. They just passed a thing earlier this year called Not Too Young to Run.
Well, are you serious?
You know what that means?
Are you serious?
You know what that means? They're basically passing an agreement saying that younger people can run. But you know how much it is to just get a form to say that you're going to run for president? It's 40 million naira. How many young people have 40 million naira? You understand? In England, if you want to be a prime minister,
that come from wealth.
Yeah, exactly. So you see where the system is just recycling the same sorts of people, right? It's the same type of people that will always be in power. And that's what they're always trying to do. They're trying to usher their children into, for example, the former governor of Delta State, his daughter is running for, she might be the state House of House of Rep in 2019. You know, this is nepotism, my brother. Nepotism is what gets people through. You want to give the opportunity to the common man to succeed as well. And that's where we are. Justice is the only way that you can enable that person an opportunity to do it.
Let's see. Let's see here. Somebody's asking, does the Biafran War count as genocide?
No, I don't. Look, I wouldn't count it as genocide. I know there were acts of, how do we say? You know, in a war situation, it doesn't matter what war. They're always going to be unjust.
Yeah.
It was a war, technically speaking, but then they used, you know, I'm sure there were scenarios where people were unarmed, and instead of taking them into custody as POWs, they were shot. There's no doubt that happened.
Of course, that's
but you know, I mean, all these Amnesty International type of groups will say that's not fair, right? But you know, in Africa, anything goes.
Somebody's at so how do young people gain power in Nigeria when the young people outnumber the old establishment?
Are you asking hypothetically, or are we talking about how we can go forward?
Well, I mean, it happened in Egypt, I think, with the Arab Spring, right?
I mean, the Arab Spring just really got rid of a dictator and put in a democratic leader. It wasn't necessarily part of the youth per se. And even then, you see what happens. Muslim Brotherhood, they had all sorts of problems immediately after. And the guy who took over, somebody else took over after him, and so on. It's a mess, really, in Egypt. Right. But anyway, I think if we're talking about, you know, how to solve the problem, I assume, right? Let's just
exactly
put it that way.
Yeah.
Well, let's start. The youth need to stop being used by the people, and that's easy by the politicians, and that's easier said than done. Because the reality is, the people, the policemen, the bodyguards, the thugs, and so on that are being used to carry out political campaigns, bully people, extort people, and so on, even commit assassinations, are the youth for the most part. Those youth are not given an opportunity to an education. They're not allowed to go to university and get a fair education. They're not allowed to you know, the very basics that you expect young people who are being bred for power. I mean, you look at Obama, for example, and this is just as an example. Obama, you know, you could see his track record from the time he finished university, you know, Harvard Law Review or whatever thing that they call, Columbia University alumni, and so on. He went through the right institutions in order to be in power.
Right.
At the moment, the only people that we have that really attain that level in Nigeria are people that live outside the shores of Nigeria, or who have studied outside the shores of Nigeria. You know, whether you're Okonjo Iweala, who was the former finance minister, or even the finance minister who Buhari just got rid of, who was born and bred in the UK, whether you're somebody like Omoyele Sowore, or Femi Fani-Kayode, who was assistant to the president, or this guy, Andy Umba, who was a businessman in the United States, came to work as an aide to Obasanjo. These are the people that they bring from outside to be part of the system, and they corrupt them, right? So, but going forward, those are the only people at the moment that we have that can come into positions of power. Now, there's another side of it, which is where those youths eventually get fed up of the system and decide to take over by themselves, right? Now, I don't think a youth-led movement, if the right leader is found, or if the right leader stands up across ethnic lines, that I think Nigerians will back them, because everybody is fed up of the same situation. The reality is, I don't see that coming. So how do we get this fixed? Probably we elect people like Omoyele Sowore. We elect people like you know, people who are younger, who have the experience, but also have the understanding of what the common man is going through. That's really the only way you fix it. It's easier said than done.
Let's see what we got in this chat room. Everyone, thank you for joining us. Hit that like button. Stop being so stingy with the likes. Let's see here. How have the Northerners contributed to the growth and development of Nigeria? You wanna talk about that?
Very general question. Well, when you say Northerners, Northerners are part of Nigeria, so bad and good, they've contributed, just like Igbos and other groups have bad and good contributed. Yorubas, bad and good, have contributed. I think that's a setup question and this type of question that, you know, people, when you answer a question like that, what you're gonna imply some type of ethnic bias. I am not ethnically biased at all. I know there are bad leaders in Nigeria, and they don't give a damn what culture they're from, what ethnic group they're from.
Right.
So that's just, you know, they've contributed. I mean, for God's sake, look, whether you like it or not, Babangida went and made sit up. I'm sorry, my son is just woken up and he's trying to sit there.
Oh.
But Babangida has was responsible for creating Abuja, like it or not, somewhere more central where everybody can feel like it's their country because it's not in the Yoruba land or Igbo land and so on. When you look at people like Yakubu Gowon, you know, he was a young guy. I think he took over when he was like in his early 30s when he took over as president. He managed to make some strides. You know, it's just a question that if you start answering, you know, it brings up all sorts of stuff. It's everybody has contributed, good and bad. So there.
Somebody in the chat room said the reason why the young Nigerians will take over is because they're afraid to die for or sacrifice their lives.
Yeah, but that's another myth, I think. Nigerians die every single day. The Nigerian army that goes to fight Boko Haram, knowing that they don't have the right arms, they're dying every day. The people who go to work every single day, you know, in markets and so on, they're dying for their country at the end of the day. You know, one way or another, people are dying for their country, you know. But this is another one of those terminologies that has been flying around for a long time. Oh, nobody's prepared to die for Nigeria. But they don't recognize all the people that are dying for nothing. I mean, how many political assassinations have occurred in Nigeria over the last 20, 30 years?
A lot.
You know, people who are willing to die, but they die and nothing happens. At the end of the day, even when you compare it to the Burkina Faso example, Thomas Sankara did everything and he died. And it reverted back to the nonsense that was there before. You know, so if you're willing to die for the country, it's not necessarily a tick. It's a good thing, of course. But it doesn't mean, it's not a means to an end. It doesn't mean that the problem is solved because you died. You understand? So, you know, let's get away from the, you know, these fancy phrases and let's just focus on how we can actually develop, you know?
All right, let's see what else we got here in the chat room. Again, everyone, thank you so much for joining us. Please hit that like button as you come into the chat. Let's see here. Houston's a prime example. I think Houston still has the largest Nigerian population outside of Nigeria,
I think largest Igbo, I don't know if, because I'm still not sure about it. I need to look it up because London's massive.
Okay, as far as Nigerians go?
I think in terms of cities, yeah, I think London maybe between London and Houston, but London historically, I mean, Nigerians have been coming to London for 100 years, so I wouldn't.
Now, somebody's asking that Biafra is needed. I mean, what are your thoughts in regard to the Biafra? The Biafra adjective?
I mean, the IPOB is the group that is really agitating for it heavy, and they have a leader called Nnamdi Kanu. And he was arrested by Buhari's government. Actually, ironically, he's I think he holds a British passport, so he's lived in the diaspora for a few years. He was arrested without trial. Eventually had a trial, was released, and now he's disappeared. In fact, just before this interview or discussion, I saw a video of him that was published by Sahara reporters in Israel, praying to your war, praying dressed in the temple and all that, praying. So, look, Biafra, just like, and Biafra is not the only group. You know, we need to talk about the Ogoni people and how they tried to secede after Nigerians first became independent. There are people who are incredibly, if you talk about Igbo marginalization, their marginalization is terrible. I mean, these people, you have acid rain that falls in some regions because these places have been badly depleted by Shell and the different oil companies who are in cahoots with the Nigerian government. In fact, I'll do a shameless plug. I did a play that was performed all across London in 2010, and it's published as a book. It's called Another Biafra. In fact, You can get it on Amazon. And it's really just a play about the Niger Delta and the people that live, the Ogoni people, who are really being treated like dirt. They're dying every single day. You know, you talk about things like Tuskegee experiment that our brothers and sisters experience in America. These people are experiencing it on another level because Shell will go and they will destroy the area and not fix it, you know, and then these people will have to go, and people who have been fishermen for centuries have to go and fish with the fish killed or fish polluted by the oil and so on. There's bunkering that goes on, this group called the JTF, which is a part of the army that will go there, steal petrol, go and sell it for themselves. You also have a group, many groups that I'm sure you've heard of, the MEND, M-E-N-D, which was a group of militants that they did a lot of kidnappings. They kidnapped a lot of Americans and British and people like that. They over the last
where in Nigeria?
Yeah, in the Niger Delta region. So they would go and kidnap for ransom to you know, they're trying to expose their story, you know, what is going on to them. So
these aren't the Niger Delta Avengers, are they?
Well, I mean, Niger Delta Avengers, I'm not sure whether that's a different group, but they had many groups of militants. You had one led by Tampolo, who I think now lives in South Africa. You had so many different groups, but MEND, Movement for the Emancipation of the Niger Delta, was the main one. And their whole thing was all about forcing the Nigerian government. They pretty much went to war with the Nigerian government until Goodluck Jonathan, who coincidentally comes from their region, managed to get them to put their arms down. Goodluck Jonathan and Yaradua. They managed to get them to put their arms down, and they paid them off. Do you know now, Dinus, those ex-militants are paid, I think, 100,000 naira per month not to go to war with Nigeria.
Why? Are you serious?
Do you know that? Yes, this is what is going on now. So they're paying these people not to go to war. So that obviously shows that, you know, there's money to pay to solve problems, but also it shows that people just want a share of the Nigerian cake, you know? Mm-hmm. And obviously, paying them to do that is the wrong way around. Give them education. You can just fix their region, you know, and let them have a chance. But these people rather pay. Again, I talk about stomach infrastructure. So there you go.
Okay, let's see what else we got here in the chat room. They need a Pan-Africanist who can bring all the states and groups together. Is there a possibility or any hope for Pan-Africanism in regards to Nigeria? Or is tribalism just to shout out to Osha?
When you say Pan-Africanism, you mean Nigeria linking up with the rest of the continent, or
just in general? Because I mean, Nigeria has the largest Black population on the planet, so you know, I would think Nigeria would need to lead the way, but I mean, they're not leading the way.
Okay.
So I'm just thinking Nigeria uniting.
Let me just say that.
Go ahead.
One second. Okay, he's sleeping. Yeah, sorry, Nigeria leading the way. Yeah, I mean, Nigeria is supposed to lead the way. I mean, we see Nigeria's big brother example. You know, Nigeria has the quote unquote one of the biggest economies in Africa. Them in South Africa. I think one of your I think I remember somebody saying that on your program yesterday, which is true. I mean, Nigeria's economy was rebased in 2013.
Right.
I don't even understand how it's physically possible for them to have the biggest economy. Definitely, they have the biggest market, but you can't have an economy when you have no lights. But anyway, we get the gist of it. Anyway, Nigeria plays a big brother role sometimes. I mean, you saw Yahya Jammeh in Gambia when he refused to step down after he lost the election.
Right.
So Buhari, Johnson Sirleaf, a whole bunch of them running there to tell him step down. You know, Nigeria is listened to an extent. The problem is their leaders don't care enough about their people to ensure that they get justice all across Africa. Because why is Nigeria the big brother, so-called the big brother, but their people are not respected anywhere on the continent? You know, why is it that they're allowing their people to be, you know, beaten, killed, thrown out of different countries all around the world without issuing statements or anything like that? It's because these people are not necessarily concerned. And this is why, again, if Nigeria was run better, it would be much more difficult for people to be corrupt. We've gone to a stage now where Nigeria has descended into absolute chaos and anarchy. I know people may think that's extreme, but that's the reality. No country in the world can function with no electricity, with no justice. And the people somehow manage to stay sane,
right?
And the population keeps growing. Nigeria is I think if you're an economist, Nigeria is the most. There's nothing you can learn at university that could teach you about how Nigeria works. It's just, it's all over the place. Bill Gates was even got fed up, him and his pumping of nonsense into Africa. Even he got fed up, said Nigeria has to fix things because it's so hard for those kind of corrupt people like Bill Gates to go and do their dirty business in Africa. So look, Nigeria needs Pan-African leaders the same way the rest of the continent needs Pan-African leaders. But Nigeria being the big place that it is, if they had a Pan-African leader, it won't be difficult for them to bring in all the neighbors. I mean, we supply electricity to places like Niger and Benin, but we have no electricity. These are the weird things that you cannot explain. But yeah, if we had one, the rest of Africa will follow suit, for sure.
All right, cool. So what we'll do, everyone, thank you for joining us. Make sure you hit that like button. I mean, we'll go ahead and close out. Just in closing, I know we kind of went off topic just a little bit, but
did we?
No, well, we didn't. We didn't. I take that back. We didn't. I just what can Nigerians do? Because I'm very interested
you're
in
Nigeria boy.
Since
you're a Nigeria boy. We understand. It's all good.
what can Nigerians do to just unite and come together?
That's $1 million question.
To the side and move forward as one.
We will know.
Because
come February.
Because a girl on a Instagram post, she lives in America now. She said Nigeria is a failed state. And I was like, how? It's not. I was just there. But she said she thinks I'm a militant Black American and I romanticize everything. Like, I mean, what can we do to make Nigeria, what needs to be done to make Nigeria more attractive?
Oh, to make Nigeria more attractive, I don't think those two are necessarily connected.
Okay.
Nigeria is a failed state. I think first time you had me on your show, I said the same thing. It's a failed state. It's just not. It's
okay.
Somehow people function in the chaos. Yeah. If you remember from our first show, I think it was one of the first things I said. But anyway, the girl's kind of spot on. I think in terms of Nigeria being attractive to other people, you see, again, Dynast, if you were prepared to go to Nigeria and live as you are, your life won't be, definitely there'll be some inconveniences.
Right.
But because you might know people, Nigeria just looked so attractive to you. You see, you have to understand why there are still many Nigerians who study abroad and go back to Nigeria. There are still many Nigerians who hustle to go abroad, study, and then go back to Nigeria. Right. Why? Because they're thinking about getting in cahoots with the money, the politicians, the pastors, the entertainment sectors. There are a lot of lucrative things for you as a Nigerian. And because Nigeria's red tape, if you call it, or even green tape, if we could call it, doesn't exist, you could sort of get your way around anything. It's one of the most attractive places for a wealthy person to live in, because there's no real accountability. It's possible for you to have your mansion, build a lovely road from the dirt road to your house, and not give it down by anybody because you're behind your walls. And when you leave in your house, you put your tinted windows up, your AC's blaring, you're not concerned with what's going outside on the street. You can go to your fancy places, your coffee shops, Starbucks, and you really have a life where you can ignore everything around you. And this is how people have lived for a long time. But so if that's what you want, you could get it now. Nigeria doesn't need to change for you. Nigeria can be amazing for you right now. If you're someone who has a passion for justice, passion for equality, just wind the window down when you're driving. Just smell the fumes from the swamps, the lagoons where people are having to live. Go to Mushin or one of the different ghettos, Ajegunle. Just go and see Kibera type levels. Kibera is the big ghetto in Nairobi. Those type of levels. And if those things still exist, then no matter who you are, you're going to be exposed to it somehow. But if you're someone who's able to ignore it, then Nigeria is fantastic. It's fantastic.
With that being said, brother, thank you so much for joining us again. How can everybody reach you? And when are you gonna the documentary? When are you gonna premiere it? Like, what's up with the documentary? I know you said you're gonna send me a link.
Yeah, I'll send you a private link because I have a sales agent who basically sells it for me, so I can't publicly put it anywhere. So I'll send it to you because I do want to do a separate show where we talk about that a little bit. So I'll send you a private link. We're just doing a sound mix at the moment. So once that's ready, it'll be ready for public consumption. So we're trying to get it into FESPACO, which is the big Pan-African film festival in Ouagadougou in February. We've also got, funny, you go in Senegal, I might be in Senegal on the 22nd of November.
I'll be back here in America, but I head to Senegal Tuesday.
Okay. So I've got another film I did is showing there, but as far as the documentary, I suppose we could talk and figure out what we can do.
Yeah, you tell me. When do you officially launch it?
It won't launch till the premiere. It will premiere at a film festival.
When?
Before it's so it will most likely be February. But between now and then, I'm thinking maybe we could do some type of. We might be able to do something between now and then. We should talk. We should talk off camera.
Absolutely.
But we might be able to do something. But I want you to watch it first, and also just gauge your opinion as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Send me the link. I'll watch it. Should I watch it tonight? If you send me the link tonight,
I'll send it to you right after this.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll watch tonight. Yeah.
So that's more of a private thing. I do have other projects, like the one I went to show in Ghana, which is a feature film. It's with a sales company, but they haven't given me any kind of. They haven't blocked me from screening it elsewhere, so we can also do something there too. But yeah, anyway, there's I've got loads of projects, but anyway. So just give my details again. Ọnuọra Abụah is my YouTube channel. I'm sorry I'm slacking with the uploads. I'm uploading some stuff now from Ghana. And then also I'm uploading, I started doing a film review series where I review classic African films. First one I've done is for Usman Temben's film Mandabi. So check that out. I'm going to be uploading that by tomorrow at the latest. So yeah, there's lots of stuff going on. Ọnuọra Abụah, AEA Films, which is on Instagram as well as YouTube. Subscribe to that. We can get a lot of love, so I appreciate it. Thank you.
No problem.
And thank you, guys, for bringing me on, my brother.
Anytime, brother. Anytime, man. Anytime, guys. But once again, everyone, thank you so much for joining us. Make sure you go to Search for Uhuru on Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, and Facebook. Make sure you like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff, you guys. Again, thank you so much for coming on. Brother Abụah, thank you so much for coming on. Until next time, family. Peace.